your woodsmanship skills with bears, whether you want to admit it or not, is pretty serious in my opinion, as far as like
that's nice to say.
yeah, the way that you look at it, and you're kind of describe about that, like, because you'd killed 2 bears with your bow, right, in Arkansas.
Yeah, the last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, and so how are you kind of doing that with, like, the thick timber and woods, and just like, bears can be anywhere.
Yeah. So like most bears in Arkansas are killed over bait. There's like more than 2 zones, but there's essentially 2 zones that are basically huntable. Zone 1's up in the Ozarks. That's like where northwest Arkansas is and stuff. And the Ozarks have a ton of private in-holdings, right? So there's like all these people have cabins and 10 acres and stuff within the national forest. Mm-hmm. The Ouachita's where I hunt, which is a different, mountain range in Arkansas that runs from like basically like outside of Little Rock into the Badlands in Oklahoma. And there's not all those in-holdings. So up in Zone 1, baiting is legal. And the reason baiting is legal is because it's hard to kill bears. And for 20 years, they were taking like 20 bears a year in Arkansas, and they need to take like 500.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm down in this place. All that to say, I'm at a place where like there's no baiting, right? So that automatically makes it a lot harder, right? It's also a low-density animal. But just like the fish thing, first thing to do is go where there's bears. Like, I know they're in the Ouachitas. I know they're not going to be in the Delta where my duck lodge is, right?
Yeah.
So go to the place where they're at, right? And then it was just walking. That's all it was. It was walking and going places. Like my buddy Clay Newcomb was like, dude, they're going to be in the thickest, nastiest stuff. So when I first started trying to find one, I just hunted the most miserable stuff. I took it a little bit too literally. And I just hunted the most miserable stuff, and I walked, and I walked, and I walked, and I looked for sign. And it took me 13 days to find a pile of bear scat. And like I was getting a little worn out.
Yeah.
I'm averaging 10 miles a day. I'm driving 3 hours to go hunt and then driving 3 hours back at night and then turning around and doing this like day after day. But so I hunted all year, never saw a bear, and I basically just learned a bunch of places where they weren't. And then I went back and kind of refined that and didn't get one the next year. And then I went back again and I was getting my butt kicked. It was opening day. I felt like I was getting my butt kicked, and then I ran into one. And that was luck. Like I came across a bear. But last year, what I did was I had keyed in, I'd figured out they're not going to be where there's pine trees. They're going to be where there's food. They're going to be where there's white oaks. They're going to be where there's black gums. That's where they're eating where I'm at, right? And so I just walk that stuff, try and be quiet, try and play the wind a little bit. I'm looking for trees. You can tell when they've been up in a tree. They'll climb a tree like a squirrel and walk. And I've seen them do this. They whip right up there. They walk around the branches. They eat the acorns off the branches. If they haven't hit the ground yet, that's their food source. That's how they enter that state of torpor. It's not true hibernation or whatever. But
Yeah.
And then I'm looking and I'm finding bear poop. And I probably kicked open 200 piles of bear poop when I was hunting this year. I'd kick it open and be like, how long has it been there? And I'm like, well, it's pretty freaking dry up here. The water holes are dried up. That thing, it's not going to stay moist for as long, and I'm just trying to figure that out. But basically just do that, find the freshest poop you can find, and then hang out.
Yeah.
And I did that. I had 2. I didn't even tell you this because I missed a bear last year before I killed the other one. I was down in this spot, and I was just getting worn out by mosquitoes. And whatever, man. I was about to take a picture for Instagram with just like this bear mark tree where it got up and scraped. And I hear something, and like you just keyed in, you can tell it's something of size. And just coming out of this gunch, just like growed up stuff like greenbrier and poke and all that stuff. I see the shape of a bear, right? And I was like, oh. And then I saw another one, and I got scared because I was like, that's a mama and cubs. I was like, I'm up. And they're like 30 yards away from me, and I still can't see them clearly.
Were you in a tree at this point?
And I was on the ground.
Okay.
And these 2 bears popped out, big bears. I mean, big bears where I live. I'd say 300 pounds each.
Yeah.
This was so cool, dude. They came out. I'm 25 yards from them, and they'd start wrestling. They're playing, man. I mean, it's amazing. They're like wrestling, playing. One gets like laying on its back, and then the other one gets up and like kind of goes back to the thick stuff and his feet around. And this one's just like laying on his back and looks like Baloo or something, And anyway, it's thick. Long story short, I got drawn back on one, and I was, couldn't make it happen. So when I was trying to release, when I was trying to, let down, I bumped the trigger, and I shot an arrow straight into a tree root. I mean, like buried it, right? I was like, dang it. But they didn't really booger. So I got another one on there, and I like took my time and I lined up, and I had like a spot, like probably about a beach ball spot to shoot through. And it was 23 yards. Like I felt like I could make that, right? I took my time, I shot, and I heard whack, and I was like I hit something, right? But the bear just like stood up, or he was already standing up, but he kind of like went forward a little bit and just looked around and then went back to doing his thing, right? And I was like, what is going on? And so I had 3 killing arrows. And so I tried to shoot another one. And then he like boogered off. He like jumped, because that one made a big smack. And he jumped off and he ran up 20 yards from me, clear as day, nothing in between us. I got no more arrows, right? He never like saw me. He just sauntered off. So I go down there and I'm like, dude, I'm going to have to trail this bear or whatever. I find both the arrows. There's no hair. There's no blood. One's in a tree. One's like down in this dry creek bottom. Long story short, I replaced my broadheads, and somehow I messed up and I put 85 grain broadheads on this thing instead of my hundreds, and they just flew wonky, and dude, you want to talk about soul crushing. I'm like, I just had that many opportunities, and like at 20 yards. But so what I did was I sat there for like an hour, snuck out of there, came back a day and a half later in the afternoon, went up a tree. I was like, dude, I got to get up above this gunch, so I'm not take that out of my equation.
Yeah.
And I just sat in the tree, man, and I read a book, and I got like to the last page of the book, and I put it down and put it in my little pocket on my vest there. And like a minute later, this other bear came out, and I got like a great shot, which is like I'm totally fine with, man. Like I had some failure. What would have really messed me up is if I had put a bad shot on that bear.
Yeah.
But I learned a lesson too, right? Like I just like one little mistake. And it's because like I'm using the same arrow setup for 10 years. Like all I got to do is swap the broadhead. It's the exact same thing. It's flying the same. Like I got the inserts in, they line up with my veins. However, I've learned how to do it. But yeah, man, I just like grabbed the wrong thing. And I'm like back of the truck, and I'm like looking, I'm like, dude, I'm like, and it's like, it was preventable if I had been a bit more thorough. And so it was like a lesson I learned that was harmless. Like no bears were hurt in the making of this hunt, right?
Yeah, no. And I mean, that's good on you to keep after it and keep like trying. 'Cause that's a soul crushing thing of like, just like everything, like say you go into that and you feel confident, and then you just feel like at the lowest of lows, like I can't do anything, at least that's the way I get sometimes.
I would have had to stop hunting for the season. If I had found blood, I would have been done.
Yeah. And two, so there was another point in that when we were talking before, you were talking about kind of hunting that middle of the day, even when it's hot.
Oh,
or like
bear 30?
Yeah, bear 30.
Yeah.
What's bear 30?
Well, and I've talked to Josh Boyd about this, and he's hunting like Montana and stuff, and it seems like it's true. And like bear 30 comes from Clay Newcomb. Like I was talking on the phone to him the day I was driving up, and I did get that bear, and he was like, "Yeah, man, bear 30, you're on it." But anyway, just from my anecdotal evidence, I'm not. When I started going, I was like doing it like deer hunting. Like I'm out there an hour before sunrise. I was never seeing bears. And I've come to the conclusion, and this is other people have said this, I'm repeating other people's information, but like I'm not going to sneak into the woods to bear hunt before the sun's up, because I can't see anything, and I think I got way more of a chance of bumping a bear, right? It seems to me that they're very active, especially in Arkansas. Like season this year opens up on the 13th of September. It'll be in the 90s. Seems to me they're like pretty active in the evening, right around, that first light. They're going to go and bed 300 yards away, like from their acorn patch or their berry patch or whatever, and chill. And then maybe 2:30, 3 o'clock, start getting late afternoon, they might come back out and, start feeding again. So it seemed like my efforts were better concentrated. Like now I still like feel like I'm missing something if I'm not out there. So I'm talking about like 10 o'clock, maybe head out there.
Yeah.
And then hunt till dark. But it's just like I was looking at something on your Instagram page, talking about, like, do you want to put miles in or do you want to put good miles in?
Yeah.
You know, like, I can go sit out there from 5:30 to noon, but I think my time would be better spent from 10 o'clock to 6:30.
No, that's exactly right. And I've talked to, a ton of successful whitetail hunters and stuff, and it's like, yeah, just what you said, like the good, putting in the good miles and focused effort versus, like there was a guy that I just had on last week on the podcast, and he was talking about hunting these thermal hub systems, and he's like, if you go into the spot too early, your thermals are blowing up in. If that buck's bedded up there, you're going to blow them out. He's like, it sounds ridiculous, but there's really only an hour out of that day where you have a chance of killing them because of the wind, as far as, blowing up to him, waiting. Those thermals drop, the sun goes down, it starts swooping down. That's when you go in to make the kill. And it's like, for me, I've always had trouble with that because it feels like you're wasting time or you're being lazy or anything, but it's just kind of taking the facts or what's thrown at you and using that smart versus just trying to, manpower it or, outwork it, essentially.
Well, you know what? I mean, look, I still enjoy that part of the hunt, right? Like, I really, really like walking in the woods and finding small things that are new to me, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh, man, that's the first time I found some owl pellets. Oh, man, that's the first time I found, like, a chinkapin oak, right? Like this kind of acorn. Or, I mean, like, I'm talking about, like, boy in a creek type stuff. I love it. Like, oh, here's a little pool in the middle of the Ouachita is like this big, and there's crayfish and stuff, and I can tell in the algae where the raccoons have been scraping their hands trying to catch these. Like, I love that stuff, right? Do all that stuff before season. Spend all day out there stinking up the woods before. Figure out, get some idea what's going on. Like, all that walking around and being in these mountains and stuff, like, I was trying to get down in the bottom, like way down in the bottoms, like hollers where I'm from, that's what you call it.
Yeah.
And the way this piece of land is, man, is, and I'm trying to talk around this. I don't want nobody to know where I'm hunting at. But it's like you start up top high,
yeah,
right? And then if you want to get down to the bottom one, it's hard as hell. Like, you're sliding down scree slides, or like, I mean, I'm trying to figure out where to tie ropes. It's like gnarly, right? Probably not safe and smart. But the wind and the thermals are doing something completely different on the top. Like, it's going up in the morning, right?
Yep.
But you get about halfway down that mountain and it starts to go down, especially if there's a body of water that's pulling.
Yes.
Right? There was no way because of the one side of it was landlocked by private. The best way to be coming downstream and walk up against the thermals. I couldn't. And it's like, dude, I could bust my tail. And all I'm going to be doing is broadcasting my scent down the middle of this holler and just frustrating myself. And you know what? When I killed these bears, I killed them up top. Like, because I can't beat a bear's nose